That's your journal's introduction. What I'd like to ask you then is, how do you do this? How do you instill hope at a time of uncertainty?
Hope is a muscle, so how do we work that out? How many reps do we need to work that muscle?
Welcome to the Lifestyle First podcast, discussing lifestyle medicine and making self-care as easy as 1, 2, 3. And now your host, lifestyle medicine physician and coach, Dr. Alka Patel.
Hi, hey, and hello, and welcome to Series 9, Episode 6 of the Lifestyle First podcast. And today we are zoning in on T for time out. And the one question that we're exploring is, how can I keep moving forward in the face of uncertainty? Now, to help me answer that question, I have with me Maggie Smith. Maggie is an author and a poet, and her poem, Good Bones, it went viral internationally. And her book, Keep Moving, Notes on Loss, Creativity and Change, it's a national bestseller. And the wonderful news is that she's now released Keep Moving, the journal. This is a wonderful interactive workbook, a real self-care tool based on this book as well. So Maggie, welcome. It's such a delight to have you here today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Very welcome. Now, in your journal, in the introduction, you write, I now know that hope is a muscle. It grows bigger and stronger the more that I use it. That's your journal's introduction. What I'd like to ask you then is, how do you do this? How do you instill hope at a time of uncertainty?
Yeah, that's a good question. Hope is a muscle, so how do we work that out? How many reps do we need to work that muscle? I mean, for me, honestly, it's so much about keeping perspective and trying to reframe things for myself. So when something goes wrong, which, we're living in times where it seems like every day we wake up and the news is sort of like a dog shock collar that is constantly pinging us with what's going wrong. And, living through, we're now in year 3 of a pandemic. It's really easy to focus on what's going wrong and get bogged down in that and not find the sort of hope and positivity to keep moving forward. And so keeping perspective for me is key. And that means sort of getting up in the morning and instead of letting myself make a mental list of everything that's going wrong, trying to focus on what's going right. And that doesn't mean ignoring what's going wrong. I do think toxic positivity is real. The idea of we only have to look at what's going well, good vibes only. I don't subscribe to that. I think we have to be realistic and live in the world that we live in. But what does it mean to get up in the morning and look at the parts of your life that are working? Really take time. And I think a journal is a great place to do that. But even if you don't have that handy, if you're commuting to work, taking some time in your mind even to tick off some things that are going well to help balance those scales. I think that little daily dose of hope and positivity, that does help, I think, us work that muscle in a concrete way.
It's important you said that, Maggie. Thank you for sharing that, because this idea that life is rosy actually creates its own stresses by itself, just that perception that I shall not suffer, and if I do, there's something wrong. Because inherently, as you said, life is painful. And this is what humanity is about. That's what being human involves. But sometimes it's that focus on the pain that elevates it even more than it actually needs to be as well. So that idea that you're suggesting, which is about focus and where your attention is going, it's not negating the pain, it's not negating the suffering, but it's allowing you to change your focus. Is that right?
Yes, and I think the perspective is key, like really looking at the size of the problem, because I think, at least for me personally, sometimes if something's going wrong, it's easy to let that take on sort of epic proportions in my mind, where I'm like, oh, well, this setback is a permanent forever problem. It's huge. Its shadow looms large. But if I can kind of pull back and take a bird's eye view and sort of look at my life as a very long or long-ish timeline, and I can kind of see that experience or that moment as just like one little line on the timeline, it helps me think about, okay, yeah, that happened and it's bad, and we can all just admit that that is bad. But I predated that bad thing and had lots of good experiences before it. So time tells me that it's going to get better and that I will have lots of good experiences post that line on the timeline. And I use this with my kids. If my daughter's stressing out about a middle school project that seems huge, right? Like it's a 30% of our grade and it's a group project and somebody doesn't want to do the work. And I mean, it's classic. Yeah. Just telling her in 3 years, you won't remember this even happened. Mm-hmm. And in 10 years, you will remember almost nothing about 7th grade at all. And just try to keep that in perspective.
I love that. I love that idea of the timeline and the line on it. It really does create this visual of time and space as well, doesn't it? But this might feel a bit easier said than done, because I've certainly used the same language with my daughter. And she said, but I'm right here, right now, and this is overwhelming now. I don't want to think about what I'm going to think about in 10 years' time. This is happening now. And I guess from an evolutionary perspective, we're also wired to zone in on the negative, just simply for our own survival and to keep us alive and to keep us moving forwards as well. So how do you overcome that? The fact that automatically the overwhelm does loom large, the uncertainty at the moment is looming large. What have we got in our toolkit that can enable that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways our tools are all different, kind of depending on what we gravitate towards. I know some people get a lot of mileage out of going for a really long walk in the woods or going for a run and just sort of reconnecting with the body, because so much of our stress lives in our body that if we're only trying to mentally process it away, that doesn't work for a lot of us. We need to find a way to sort of get it out. As I tell my little boy, go get your wiggles out. Like sometimes you just need to move, like literally keep moving. For me, the things that make me feel sort of more grounded in the moment are the things that make me feel most like myself. And I think that's something that can get lost when we're suffering or grieving or stressed out, is we kind of forget who we are. And a lot of the hits that we take in life, whether it's a death loss or a job loss or a relationship ending or a diagnosis that sort of makes us rethink what our life might look like, they're hits that we take as people. Like, who am I now if I don't have this job, if I don't have this relationship, if my kids don't live here all the time now, or if I'm an empty nester, or whatever the case may be, who am I now? And so I think one of the things that can help all of us get through whatever the time is finding ways to reconnect with that sort of core inner self. And for me, it's writing. So for me, thinking about, whether it's journaling or working on a poem or writing an essay, or even writing a letter, just finding a way to get my ideas on paper really helps me sort of also get it outside of my body and put it someplace else where I can kind of see it on the page. And that helps, I think, with some perspective too. There's something meditative about that, especially handwriting something. There's actually, scientific research that backs up the fact that writing something down, handwriting rather than typing, helps us process it. It just works in a different area of the brain.
Yeah, 100%. It's also there's the jumble in your mind that obviously keeps churning. And there's something concrete about translating that through your arm to a pen, to a piece of paper that actually translates it into something that you can almost decipher better. You can understand better as well, can't you?
Yeah.
And again, I think from what you said about think about the good and focus on the positive when you can, when you're feeling this state of overwhelm or worry or uncertainty, is that at that time, there doesn't feel like the space in the mind to even extract that. Or how can you even find that? But if you've got that written down, if you've got this sheet of paper, a journal, something that you can look at to say, yes, these are my feel goods. I'm going to pick that right now. I am going to go for that walk. I am going to stroke my dog. I am going to wrap my hands around a cup of tea, whatever those are. You're right. If you've got it written somewhere already, you're likely to access it rather than in the jumble of the mind, aren't you?
Yeah, I think that's why, having practice, having these sort of things as practice is important, because if you don't have any kind of self-care in place when things are going fine, when things stop going fine, you're going to be sort of like struggling to keep your head above water because your life preserver is not there. You have to figure out what to do. But I think just on a daily basis, if you're in a mindset to take care of yourself, whether that's exercise or meditation or writing or whatever the thing is that helps you sort of dial into yourself, then you can sort of roll with the sort of ebbs and flows a little bit better because you already have that, your toolkit's right there with you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I often talk about journaling as part of your emotional well-being toolkit as well. I do that quite a lot. And the feedback that I get from a lot of people is, but I don't know what to write. What do I write? What do I put onto paper? What's your thoughts around journal prompts? I know your own journal is full of these. How do these journal prompts work? Give us some examples.
So in Keep Moving the Journal, I went into the book and sort of pulled out some of the quotes that either I found most useful when I was going through sort of my hardest year, or that readers were really attaching to. And then I built questions and prompts off of those quotes, just as a guide to help people sort of get started. But I agree. I mean, if you wake up one morning and you have a feeling that you need to write through a problem, you don't need a journal prompt to write through the problem. You can sit down and just let it unscroll. And I think that's really useful. I think something like Keep Moving the Journal can be helpful when you don't have that either practice going in your life already, or if you're not someone who has that immediate momentum. So if you're feeling a little bit stuck, having someone ask you to name some rituals that are useful to get you calming down, or write about your best qualities, or that's one of my favorite ones from the journal. Pile the praise on yourself, because that's not something that we do very often. And I think a voice of sort of self-compassion is probably one of the best tools in our toolkit that we can look to. And so often we are very kind to others when they're going through hard times. And when we ourselves are going through hard times, we are tough on ourselves. I sometimes in my inner mind speak to myself in a way that I would not speak to you or my sister, or even, my neighbor, or frankly, a stranger on the street who said, oh, I made this bad decision and this is the outcome, or this didn't turn out the way I hoped. I think we often show a lot of kindness and compassion to others, and then we really sort of browbeat ourselves about, we should have known better, we shouldn't have made that decision, or probably we deserved this thing not happening, or that opportunity wasn't meant for us because we're not ready for it yet, or whatever the thing is. And so, some of the prompts in Keep Moving the Journal are really designed to help us have a more compassionate relationship with ourselves, which I think also makes us better people and better able to do that with others in the world.
And there's a real core to that as well, isn't there? As you say, we are innately compassionate. We are, whether that's to others or to ourselves, both we are, but it gets lost, doesn't it, with the stresses and the day-to-day and the 24/7 that we live. So we don't give ourselves that space to tune in to that. And it isn't easy, is it? It isn't easy to extend that own arm to yourself. And perhaps, as you say, the answer to self-compassion actually lies in asking a question. Some of those prompts, some of those journaling prompts that prompt an answer to a question can really help you sort of find that guide within yourself as well.
Yes, and just approaching oneself and issues with curiosity rather than judgment. Sort of like, okay, what's going on here? What really happened? What's possible? instead of like, well, you should have, you shouldn't have. And sort of leading with that mindset, I think, is really useful. And that's where the questions and the prompts, I think, really come in, because sometimes we don't think to ask ourselves these questions, and having somebody else kind of prod us is useful.
Yeah. Again, time often comes into these conversations. Some feedback I get is that I don't have time to sit down and journal. It just doesn't fit into my day to day. So how do you respond to that?
Everyone has 5 minutes. I mean, I think even, if you get up first thing in the morning and, for me, I put the kettle on and I wait for the water to heat up so I can make my cup of, my pour over coffee. Even if I only journal while the kettle's heating up, it's something. Like, that's a gift I've given myself that I, great. Even if I only run 2 blocks, that's more than I did the day before. So that's something. So I think we all have time. It's just about prioritizing, and making it a habit.
Yeah, it's that consistency, isn't it? If you feel, yes, you know what, the last time I did write something down, it helped me, make it a habit, but create the environment for success. Don't have that journal tucked into your cupboard. Have it visible, have it next to your kettle, have it by your bedside, put your favorite pen next to it. This is creating that environment for success for yourself as well, right?
I love that. I love the idea of, if something makes you feel better, keep doing it, is just good advice. If it feels good to, light a candle and relax and read for half an hour before bed, then just do that at night before bed. I think sometimes we do things like that and then we realize, oh, it's been a long time since I did that thing that I found really useful. And if we just sort of try our best to build that into our days, we're not talking about hours on end. We're talking about 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes here and there, and it can make a big difference.
Yeah. So your idea of moving forwards is really not just a big giant leap, but really edging yourself forward, allowing those small edges to be meaningful, to be consistent, to be something that really does keep you going in the direction that you want to, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think particularly when we're struggling, it is hard enough to think one day at a time. I mean, sometimes it's really 1 hour at a time. And keeping moving is just like, okay, how do I get through the next half of this day when I know I've got this challenging thing up ahead and this meeting and this whatever. So yeah, I think, again, perspective, thinking about that sort of big timeline and not trying to see yourself skipping ahead, jumping 10 lines. It's like, how do you get to the next good place? How do you make the next best decision for yourself? How do you make the next 3 hours more livable and enjoyable than the last 3 hours? And I think keeping it granular makes it feel a little bit more doable.
And now, here is your lifestyle first prescription. Your 3 activating actions to take you from knowing to doing.
Can you give us 3 takeaway actions to move forward, to move from that place of uncertainty, to change that perspective? What would you suggest?
Well, one of the things that someone wise told me is, first thing in the morning when you wake up, ask yourself, what else is possible? And so I do that in the morning. I wake up and I think, what else is possible? And just putting myself in a headspace of possibility and curiosity and openness, and instead of closed thinking, which I think is stressful thinking, is really useful. I think it also helps us open up our imaginations to what might be possible for us. So I think starting the day that way is great. The second thing I would say is find a way to connect with yourself every day. And it may be that journaling is for you and it may not. I mean, not everybody is going to be a journaler. I would say try it. And if it doesn't work for you, then find the other thing that does, whether it's, meditating or reading 5 poems in the morning while you make your coffee, or taking your dog on a different route to go through a more scenic part of town, and either listen to music or just listen to sort of ambient noise and take some deep breaths and start the day in a positive way. And then the other thing I would say is find a way to be useful to another person. And that doesn't have to be big either. It does not take much to make my day better. It could be one text from one friend checking in, or somebody dropping a muffin off on their way home from a bakery I like because they know I like that muffin. That is always a win. Or just any little reach out, offering to pick up someone else's kid from school because you're already going that way in the first place. If you make a meal and it's too much for your family, put half in a container and take it to your neighbor, or shovel their sidewalk if it's snowy, or whatever the thing is. But one of the things that keeps me feeling better, even when my life feels stressful, is feeling like I can do a small bit of good for someone other than myself.
And there's such a ripple effect to that as well, isn't there? And nothing is too small that it doesn't have meaning. Sometimes we hesitate because we don't think that this will be received well, or this isn't, I should do more, and we don't even do the small thing. And yet that small thing can make all the difference and have a huge ripple of impact as well. So thank you so much, Maggie. Those are really 3 very powerful things to think about and just sprinkle through our day. And we can do that immediately. There's no reason to wait either. So look, I'm sure people are going to want to find out more about your work or tap into you. What's the best way to connect with you?
I am Maggie Smith Poet on social media, so that people don't go looking for the dame. And it's maggiesmithpoet.com is my website. So if you Google me and just make sure you add poet, you'll be able to find me. Otherwise, you're going to get a lot of terrific information about Dame Maggie Smith.
Wonderful. Thank you, Maggie Smith Poet. I will put all of those onto the podcast description as well. So thank you so much. You've shared so much with us already, and I will definitely be tapping into your journal and everything else you've got out there. You've got a wealth of really beautiful, deep, resonant material that I think will have a connection with everybody who reads what you have available. So thank you so much. And I wish everyone listening a happy, healthy day.
Thanks for joining us on the Lifestyle First podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and share. To learn more, please visit www.dralkapatel.com.